How can we learn anything from a Bronze Age civilization where people believed that the world was on top of four elephants who rested on top of a turtle, and then there was another turtle? And so it just seems absurd, like these myths. And also, how can we know that these patterns and um, archetypes and patterns and symbols mean anything? And uh, I'm going to try and argue for this. So, and I mean, just to take a step back for a second, we're looking at prehistory and the sort of emergence of civilization, these early civilizations. And even all of this is pretty complicated. So, how can you even label something an early civilization when we're comparing China and Mesoamerica and sub-Saharan Africa with so many differences? And I'm going off of some of these writers. This guy, his name is Bruce Trigger, who I've been reading right now, and he compares. What does he compare? Seven early civilizations: the Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Chinese Shang and Western Zhou, the Valley of Mexico, the classic Maya, the Inca, and the Yoruba. And he, chose ones where he had more data. So it's not a perfect list. But what he points out is that it's striking that these civilizations were so similar. And it's so he, for example, he takes the Babylonians and the Egyptians, who were the regionally the most close to each other and who had the most contact with each other, and yet these were the ones with the biggest difference structurally in their societies. That there's amazing similarities between um, which ones? The Egyptians in North Africa and the Incas in South America, and between the Babylonians and the Mexicans structurally in these societies. And but so there's a lot of similarities. It's striking. And you know, it's not that there's some kind of magic spirit that's kind of flowing through each of these societies, but it's more a cultural selection that these cultures, selected. Like there's natural selection, there's cultural selection for what's working, what's getting you more power, more technological um, progress, and that those things work, and they changed these societies. There is a kind of evolution that we can trace. So so good. So how strange rituals, stories, and structures allow you to think freely, can free the mind. And it comes out of this axial age referring to that time period between 800 and 200 BCE, used to be called BC, which comes out of uh, the upper Paleolithic revolutions and the early civilizations, um, and where we have uh, a kind of development of more moving from mythic and mimetic interactions and representations to theoretic and conceptual philosophy, more advanced religion, for lack of a better term. And it's at an interregnum. An interregnum means in between two kingdoms or two types of regime. And so you have the passing away of one and you haven't had the next one develop. So there's this kind of moment of fluidity and creativity where wise and able men and women were able to really make huge leaps in the development of thought and human thought and philosophy, and kind of begin philosophy. The whole term philosophy comes out of this time period in Greece, where people were seeking universal philosophical ideas in the face of conflict and warring states, and trying to figure out who's going to win here, how are we going to organize society. And so we're going to look at a list of Greece, Rome, Israel, Buddhism, etc. Let's look at it right now. Let's go to the screen here. And just walking through this is based on various people's work. I mentioned Bruce Trigger and Robert Bella, among others. And anyway, just really quick, Greece, you have Homeric myth, the Iliad and the Odyssey, these gods and goddesses shaping the lives of the heroes like Achilles and Odysseus. And people reflect on that mythic and enactive mimetic thought, and they get to the theoretic. And you have Socrates, Plato, Heraclitus, Aristotle, Sophocles in the world of art writing tragedies, where you are doing a whole new level of wisdom tradition, of philosophical inquiry that has never been done before, and that the Romans are going to pick up. The Romans conquer Greece, and they basically copy it all. And they have their Stoics, and you have Virgil, and you have Cicero. This is a few hundred years later, but they're building completely on this Greek tradition. Jumping across to Palestine, you have the Israelites, and they have their mythic tradition in the Pentateuch, Genesis, Leviticus, Exodus, etc. And a few hundred years later, people reflecting on those, Elijah, Job, Deutero, Isaiah, the prophetic traditions, thinking about the suffering servant, because they're what all these people have. One of the things that these people have in common is they're facing suffering, they're facing mortality, and the old answers are not sufficient anymore. And so yes, this leads to a whole new level of wisdom and developments of wisdom traditions. Similar in Buddhism, where Siddhartha Gautama sees human suffering and can't figure out what to do with it. And that leads to the whole beginning of Buddhism. And in India, where Gautama Buddha was, you have the Upanishads. In China, you have the myths and the rites of the ancient Chinese from the Shang and the Western Zhou dynasties. And then you have a kind of breakdown in these warring states, and he's got to reflect on that. And he does his philosophy, which is amazingly parallel to what was done in Greece with Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Here it is, Confucius in China, the Confucian tradition, the Taoist tradition in China, which is in some ways the opposite of the Confucian tradition, Lao Tzu, and the yin and the yang, these powerful concepts and others that they developed. Zoroaster in Persia, coming up with very similar ethical rules as Confucius and others. So good. So this is the Axial Age, and these are the traditions that come out of there. And so yeah, I'm arguing for the importance of studying these traditions, this Axial Age set of traditions. But why not just erase all that? Why don't we just choose freely from where I'm sitting right now? I'm in the 21st century. Why do I need these 3,000-year-old ideas? And one answer is the danger of presentism, where all of your thought and ideas come from the last 70 years or even the last 10 years, like anything before the year 2000 or 2010 is like so boring, so I don't even have that any interest in it. Well, I mean, you're cutting yourself off from like most of human wisdom, and you can think like, well, I'm still free, right? Are you? Like, if you just choose what's immediately present to you via media or even books, you are driven by whose ideas? Your own, or the ideas most powerfully present in our market economy? We live in a market world, a market economy where Amazon and Apple dominate, and others, and advertisers, and so we become a slave of the advertisers. um there's nothing wrong with the advertisers, there's nothing wrong with Amazon, but we don't want to become a slave to those ideas, and we think, oh, I'm just free. Well, you're just obeying like a slave. I mean, um where did your language come from? Even thinking about that, like even the word free thinker, where did that come from? It didn't just come from anywhere. It's got its roots in Judaism and the Greeks, and or the interiority that Augustine has in his Confessions. Like that didn't come out of nowhere. There there was no kind of writing about the human interior dialogue. I mean, it wasn't no, I don't know if there's no writing about human interiority before Augustine, but certainly Achilles in Greece, or Odysseus, or even Abraham and the Jewish tradition, they didn't have that kind of self-reflection. Like this, which leads to things like our thinking about freedom of thought, or the yin and the yang. Like those didn't come out of anywhere, and those powerful ideas, shaped so many people's traditions. Modern liberalism or democracy, those didn't come out of anywhere. And if we don't look at those things as rooted in these axial age traditions of Judaism and Greece, especially, but also the others, what's going to happen? We're going to lose it. We're going to lose that Western liberal democratic tradition. We think like, oh no, we've got a total handle on it because it's just rational. It's just purely rational. Well, certainly it's rational, but it's rooted in this mythic thinking, and we can't just totally go against it. As I was saying, some are going to object. Some are like the what are they called? The new atheists, like Sam Harris, are going to talk about, gosh, we got to just these Bronze Age myths where they're telling you to turn off your reason and believe something for which there's no evidence, and shamanic healing and oracles eating magic mushrooms, and you're trying to like listen to those folks. Why not just climb that ladder that they set up for us and then kick it away? We don't need that ladder anymore. No, if you do that, it's like cutting the limb of the tree that you're sitting on, and you're going to fall. We need that tree. We need the roots of that tree even. These mythic structures and patterns and rituals enable free thinking. A tradition, it doesn't shackle you. A tradition frees your mind. What's the opposite? Like, so for example, like some people have tried, let's just get rid of myths completely. Let's just be purely rational, or at least think that we're being purely rational, like the Soviet Union or Cuba. And they say, oh, we're like Marxists. We're just scientific materialists. We're just using science. Right? Wrong. Hello. And so because you think you're scientific, you're certain that you're scientific, what's the result? Well, I mean, look at the result of the Soviet Union, a complete debacle in a society that just collapsed on itself. So by trying to be tolerant of all ideas, you end up being the most intolerant. There's this Soviet joke I was looking up. Anyway, I don't know if this makes sense to you if you know much about the Soviet Union, but these people in prison, these three guys. And the first guy says, and this is in a gulag, which is the Soviet prison system. And the first guy says, well, I'm here because I spoke out against Trotsky. And Trotsky was at one point a leader, then he ends up getting in trouble. The second guy says, well, I'm here because I spoke in favor of Trotsky. And so because Trotsky eventually got into trouble with the Soviets. In fact, he had to run away and he got killed actually by the Soviets. Um, although I just ruined my joke because the third guy says, I'm Trotsky. So Trotsky didn't get in prison. He actually got executed by the Soviets. So all it is to say, like, this is not a free society. These are like the most intolerant of societies are the ones who think they're the most tolerant. So beware of thinking that you're tolerant. Beware that you're thinking that I'm purely rational. I'm the only rational person around. Everybody else is clueless. Beware of that thought. I mean, it's been done before, and like Stalin and Trotsky and those other guys did not end up so well. So, okay, under that argument. Next argument. I've said this before. How the world manifests itself to me depends on my attention, how I attend to the world. And what do I attend to? I mean, I could attend to, for example, that green painting, and I can sort of be blind to like these books over here. Like I'm gonna figure out what am I attending to, what's important, what's valuable. And my experience of ritualistic story in the past is how it allows me to figure out what to attend to. And so then the world makes sense. And just as a kind of silly example, like one of the things that they'll do, and I should try this, I haven't tried this yet, is to go to like a meeting. I was at a meeting last week and I forgot to do this. And you're speaking to a bunch of people and they're sitting in this room and you've been sitting there for an hour or something. And you say, okay, everybody look up at the ceiling for a second, please. Okay. Don't look anywhere else. Just look up at the ceiling. Okay. What color is the carpet? And nobody knows, or they get it wrong. And they've been looking at it. I mean, it's been there for the last hour, but because you did not attend to it, you have no idea. Like, so it's not like I wasn't aware of it, or I'm blinded to it, or it's been blocked from my vision. No, the world, we figure out the world by attention. This is this powerful rubric of seeing how our epistemology, how our knowledge of the world, how the world manifests itself to us works. It's not a simple thing. It's complicated. And ritualized mythic story is crucial to this, an image and pattern. And Oscar Wilde, that is, was, among other things, an art critic. And he'd go to these art galleries and write about it. And there was a painter named Turner, J.M.W. Turner, a British painter, who was a really good painter in the 1800s, earlier than Wilde. And he was really good at painting the atmosphere, the fog, the kind of precipitation that shapes our vision of things. Wilde said, before Turner, there was no fog in London. Okay, he's kidding, but what does he mean? He's serious. And this has to do with this attention thing. That was there a fog there? Yeah, of course. It physically was there, ontologically was there, but nobody noticed it, or nobody noticed its potential to beauty. And so once Turner had those many paintings, then people really noticed like the beauty and the mysticism that kind of comes, not mysticism, just the beauty that comes from that effect, that visual effect in like a city like London or other cities which are very foggy. Okay, and so this creates a style, a way of appreciating the world, a fashion even, because like, I mean, one of the things Wilde said was that these painters in the 1800s, like Turner or Edward Burne-Jones or Dante Gabriel Rossetti, well, some of them would paint women of fashion. And sometimes they would be painting a woman who was not traditionally beautiful, let's say, didn't have the kind of characteristic features that previous artists and fashion designers appreciated, like maybe like this kind of big long neck or this jaw that was not typical. But because Dante Gabriel Rossetti kept painting it, it all of a sudden became fashionable to look that way. So women would like wear things which would accentuate their neck or their jaw, or they wear their hair a certain way to accentuate those things. Because were those things beautiful before? Well, they weren't until someone made it into a fashion. That's how fashion works. It's kind of, in some ways, it's kind of, I was going to say it's kind of dumb, but it's not dumb. It's just the way we see the world. These things shape our perception of the world and our perception of beauty and our perception of wonder. So these are serious things. They're not just kind of silly side items. So these mythic stories, these ritualized myths and patterns, it's not that we need to literally believe them, and like Zeus and Cupid and these kinds of figures. I don't believe in them, but reading them, appreciating them, understanding what they're referring to shapes my attention, shapes what I value. There's the word worship, which comes from worthship, like what's worthy, what's valuable. And so these mythic stories teach me to appreciate certain values and certain things, whether that's the beauty of the fog or the beauty of the woman's neck, that then I kind of pay attention to them. And that shapes how I see the world. Or it's like the Epic of Gilgamesh, who it's the story about a guy who wants to live forever, but he realizes, or he's taught that you're not going to live forever, but if you have an epic story and you do epic deeds, then you will be remembered forever, as we do today. This Gilgamesh guy, or Achilles, who was similar to Gilgamesh, like wanting to be remembered, but he also has mercy, where he shows mercy to Priam after he shows incredible lack of mercy to Hector, who he drags around Hector's dead body for a really long time, to you know disrespect the body. He does eventually respect Priam and then give the body back so that Priam, the father, can properly bury his son. Or Odysseus, the story of Odysseus, where it's a different type of heroism than Achilles, where it's this kind of trickster, shrewd type of hero, a new type of hero. Or Deutero Isaiah, where you see a suffering servant, which will be picked up by people like Jesus Christ, and that suffering faithfully, serving others, even having pain inflicted on you, can be seen as heroic, which was much different than other heroic stories. So these stories shape how we perceive the world, and that's how meaning emerges. The previous images, stories are embedded. They're a bias, but not a bad bias. I mean, they're a necessary bias. We all have to have a frame that allows the world to make sense to me. Even an absurdist, like an existentialist who says that the world is absurd. How do I say that? Absurd has been shaped by these ideas. I mean, you can't even have the concept of absurd until you've had the concept of not absurd or sacred, or I don't know what's the opposite of absurd, like serious or meaningful. So these axial traditions, these stories and myths and patterns from the axial age, these ancient stories, break us out of presentism. link me with a tradition, a wisdom tradition, an ecology of practice. Socrates, his humble wonder at the world, saying, I don't know. What do I know? Asking himself what I know. This opens up his world, his practice of meditation, of non-striving, breaks him out of his self-deception, his self-destruction. And I want to do the same thing. I want to break out of my self-deception because we all have that tendency. It's like basically human tendency. Because we have our wants and our desires and our subconscious, our unconscious wants, ice cream or whatever it is, and we trick ourselves, we deceive ourselves. So these wisdom traditions are crucial. Are these patterns real? Archetypal patterns, the hero's journey, the trickster hero, the mother hero. Well, there's a lot to be said on this. I think they're real. That is to say, they actually exist in the real world. But it doesn't really matter. I mean, for my argument at this point, it doesn't matter if they're real or not. They have effects in the world. They have effects in how the world emerges to us, how we perceive the world, how I attend to the world. That's where you can see it having its effect. Let me take an example. So like, and I'm kind of raging a lot in many different directions here, but so bear with me. But one pattern is the market, or the capitalist market. Is the capitalist market real? It's an immaterial thing. And I think it is real. But even if you don't think it's real, it has humongous effects in the real world. The market has increased wealth of some countries and of some people an unbelievable amount, whether that's Elon Musk or the United States or Britain, like, or it's increased medical technology because this market drives medical technology to go higher and higher and higher, or digital technology to go higher, like Amazon and Apple, and Facebook. Like these technologies are getting extremely powerful. Or another example of an immaterial pattern that's in the world, leadership. Is leadership real? Is this immaterial set of values and patterns and hierarchy of values? And Stephen Covey has written his books about the 7 habits of highly effective people, or some people follow Jocko Willink. I like Jocko Willink. He was a Navy SEAL, and he tells people how to foster the virtues of leadership and how they can become a better leader, extreme ownership, and these different things that he talks about. And is that a real immaterial reality? I think it is, even though it's really hard to define leadership. I mean, you can write books and books about it, but you recognize it and you're like, that guy just jumps out, that person has leadership, and you want to follow them, and or you say, like, let's make that person the leader so that we can get more done, whether that's as an army or as a business. And this pattern and set of values and stories that's embodied in that leader is real. Those are, I would submit that those are real. And even if you don't think they're literally actually real in the real world, their effects are real. And they work through our attention and the mythical ritualized patterns that have been imbibed by me. And then I don't think I'm projecting them on the world. In fact, I'm not. And it's up to debate, like how much they're really there before I look at them, or if it's just because I'm looking at them that they emerge. But in any case, they work. So that's the story for today. And that's it.